welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EN World. I'm your host, Jessica, and this week we're talking about Blue Planet, and we have Jeff Barber here to tell us all about it. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you about Blue Planet because we are doing, in September, different science fiction tabletop RPGs, and Blue Planet is one of those iconic tabletop RPGs with a really long history, and it's lined up perfectly because you're currently shipping the new edition, Recontact, so we can talk about all the differences in the history of the game. So I'm excited to dig into it and talk with you about it. If you are watching the live stream, hello, thank you for joining us. Any links for things we're talking about will be up on the screen like this. And if you're listening to the podcast, there'll be links in the show notes that you can click through to see what we're talking about. So, Jeff, before we dig into Blue Planet, I'd like to be nosy and talk about you and your history with games. So the first question I'll ask is, do you remember the first tabletop role-playing game that you played? So what got you into the hobby?
I do, and probably like most people, it was Dungeons and Dragons, or at least the interpretation of Dungeons and Dragons that one of my high school friends had kind of made in his own mind. It was one of those things where we shared an interest in all things kind of nerdy and fantasy, Lord of the Rings and that sort of thing. And he said, well, I know this thing called Dungeons and Dragons. Why don't you come over and I'll show you what it is? And I had no idea what he was talking about, but I figured I'd give it a go and immediately fell in love with art form.
Fantastic. But you have mentioned previously when we were talking before the show, science fiction is your kind of love and joy. So when did you move from kind of fantasy role-playing games more into a science fiction genre?
Well, that's kind of funny because there weren't many. I'm kind of old, and there weren't as many science fiction games in the early '80s as there are now. And so it was fantasy for a few years, and then I honestly fell out of gaming for quite a while. And then at the end of my college experience, was introduced to BattleTech, the miniatures game, and that kind of rehooked me, and I started to dug deeper into the science fiction games that had become available in the time, and moved on from there, discovering Traveller and really getting hooked on that, and just finding whatever science fiction games were available.
Beautiful. And what made you move into kind of creating games? Because a lot of people, love games and are into the hobby, but not everyone goes on to kind of, create and publish games. So what did that look like for you to step into the creation space?
I had met John Tynes. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He is the creator of Delta Green. We were college roommates, and
oh wow, okay.
And we gamed together. And he started this fanzine for Call of Cthulhu, and I was trying to be an artist. I didn't write much at the time, but I started contributing to that and got involved when he founded Pagan Publishing, and so worked with them for quite a while. Though science fiction was my interest, a close second is horror gaming.
Sure.
And so I was really excited to be part of the kind of birth of Delta Green. At some point, we had that kind of classic arc that rock bands go through, kind of creative differences and went our separate ways. But that's when, realizing I didn't want to get out of the gaming industry in as much as we had been in it, I decided that to stay there and remain involved, I needed to create a product line that I was really excited about and really motivated by, and that was the birth of Blue Planet.
Amazing. Well, what a wonderful segue. Let's start talking about Blue Planet. For people that aren't familiar, could you give us an intro into the setting and what this world is?
It is a hard science fiction game that takes place on Earth's first extrasolar colony world. It turns out to be a water world, and it leans heavily into the tropes of sort of the Wild West frontier. There is a original colony effort that gets abandoned, and the survivors of that initial effort sort of become the natives of the planet. several decades later, their planet is recontacted by authorities from Earth, and shortly thereafter, they discover something called xenosilicate, a MacGuffin that we use to try to drive the economy of the planet. Long before James Cameron did it in Avatar, this is a mineral that can be used to do genetic engineering, but as a result, prolong life indefinitely. So there's this huge gold rush that starts, and the game takes place in that sort of precipice where you've got the original colonists trying to keep their planet independent and protected, and these boomtown growing, all these newcomers and settlers coming in with the mining corporations trying to exploit the planet, and you're playing in amongst all the tensions that occur in that sort of milieu.
Fabulous, thank you. And the game was originally launched, was it 25 years ago or close to 25 years ago?
Yeah, we started working on it in 94, and the first edition came out in 97. So whatever the math is on that, I think just 25.
Yeah, so, close to. Wow, incredible. And the game's been, like, it's moved around quite a lot. Could you give a little bit of a history of the game? Because I know it's changed hands, it's published.
So we've always owned it. I've always owned it with my partner, Greg Benage. And in maybe 2 or 3 years in, we partnered with Fantasy Flight Games. They were looking for a role-playing game to add to their studio. I don't know if anybody remembers, but they hit it big for a short time with a miniatures game called Disc Wars, as a tabletop tactical game of these cardboard discs, and you had different forces. They hadn't yet become the company that they were destined to become, but they wanted a role-playing game, so they licensed it from us and did a second edition. Well, we did a second edition for them. Greg actually went to work for them, and we did a new mechanic set, which was much stronger than the initial mechanic set in first edition. And then they did a supplement line of maybe 7 or 8 books. It had a pretty good run for maybe 5 or 6 years. And then they let it sunset, and the license reverted back to us. There was a GURPS Blue Planet conversion guide that Steve Jackson Games did, so that you could play Blue Planet with GURPS. And then there was a short-lived revision of the second edition by an iteration of FASA Games that never really took off, though you can still find it in various PDF sale sites. And then, must have been 2019. I had myself taken a hiatus from game design for a while, maybe 10 years even, and hadn't really been involved in the industry. And I came back and put out a Kickstarter for a game called Upwind, and had kind of finished that project. But through that project, had connected with Gallant Knight Games, and it's a bit of a convoluted story, but in the end, we decided that we were going to take the opportunity to offer a new edition of Blue Planet, one that took advantage of modern ethos and game design, and all of the production advancements that had happened since the first editions. The opportunity to do full color art, to create sort of a definitive edition of the books, to take advantage of the modern technology in this kind of publishing, and to be able to put a new system in place, one that took advantage of what we've learned about game design in the last 25 years, was pretty exciting. And so we decided to do that, obviously deciding that in 2019, and then the COVID shutdown coming has had some pretty major impacts on the project. Not only did it delay our Kickstarter by a year and a half or so, but it had such great impacts on creatives in terms of their ability to support themselves and the ability to find the space in themselves to be creative in a time that was so hard. There was a lot of struggle to keep staff and freelancers working, and so the whole process, combined with the normal ups and downs of running a Kickstarter and a two-man operation, trying to get something published, it's taken this long to finally get it into the mail to the backers, and it should be literally any moment that it goes into shipping mode.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to hear that the crowdfunded backers, it's being shipped. I believe last I checked they were on boats, which seems very thematically appropriate.
Yeah, well, they're back. They're here. They're in the warehouse. They're being packed up for final destinations as we talk.
Fantastic. So if anyone's interested in Blue Planet after listening to this and they weren't a crowdfunding backer, will they be able to get a copy of the game online somewhere after it's gone out to them? Or
yeah, obviously they can get PDF copies through DriveThruRPG once we launch there. There are going to be physical versions available. I have to say, you'll have to check the Gallant Knight Games website for the details. I'm not sure how extensive the retail distribution will be, but I know that there'll be certainly mail order options.
Perfect. That sounds ideal. Just for when we get into it, if anyone's listening, those links are in the podcast show notes. You can click through and have a look there. So let's dig into Blue Planet. So a D10 system. What is the core kind of mechanics and how does the system work?
It's really pretty simple, and anybody who knew the second edition will see the genetics there. It's a clear sort of descendancy, but we've greatly simplified it, made it much more intuitive and much broader. The core loop of mechanical resolution is you have 4 basic attributes, and you have a list of skill sets. And you take the value of the attribute and the value of your skill set, add them together as a target number, and then you roll 1, 2, or 3 dice, depending upon whether it is a general, core, or specialty aspect of your skill set. The skill sets are the thing that I think are most different from both what Blue Planet had before, this extensive skill list, but also more traditional games. The skill sets are descriptors of either major like professions or training that a character has had, or major aspects of their personality or experiences. For example, you could have a general skill set of scientist that has a core of biologist that has a specialty of geneticist. So the assumption is that anything a biologist might have some expertise in or ability to do, you could do. You don't need an extensive skill list that talks about physical science and biological science and chemistry and physics and all that kind of thing, right? It's to represent a much more kind of like rounded person with that profession. Similarly, you might have military experience, or you might have grown up in a street gang, and those things can be your skill sets. Then you roll 1 die if it's general, 2 dice if it's core, and 3 dice if it's a specialty. So it is technically a dice pool, but it's a very structured dice pool, and it's an easy one to determine. The more specialized you are at something, the more chances you have of succeeding, because all you need is a single success. It is a system that has a lot of sort of optional modifiers that you can throw in. The setting remains a hard science fiction, so the mechanics, at least from my perspective, need to be able to support the kind of detail that some players might want in a setting like that. But we streamline a lot of it and provide it in sort of the context of being optional in other ways too. But the core loop is quite simple, and the way the characters are structured, because of their skill sets, those aren't chosen from lists. You get to, you can crib some from the book if you want to, but you're encouraged to make up your own. Additionally, you can modify your core attributes a little bit as well in terms of sort of descriptive nuance. So every character is actually and absolutely different than any other character. There's no kind of repeats in the Blue Planet universe.
Fantastic. Well, we're talking about characters a bit, that we actually in the setting didn't talk through who we're going to be playing in the game. So what sort of character options and who are we? Are we the original people on the planet trying to defend, or can we be the people going to the planet to try and
Right.
get the resources?
So the simple answer is yes.
Okay.
You can be any and all.
Mm-hmm.
One of the sort of strengths of the Blue Planet system or game, and then one of the things that we've been challenged on by players in the past, is that it's wide open. We want to create a really interesting science fiction setting in which you could tell any kind of story you wanted. So you can
Mm-hmm.
play any kind of character you want. You can be a street urchin who was raised on the planet, or you can be a super soldier who was just shipped to the planet to help quell the pending sort of insurgency. And then, of course, anything in between. One of the challenges in that, though, is we've got in this newest edition there are about almost 700,000 words. It's two very large books, and a lot of people are intimidated by that sort of mass to the setting. And so one of the criticisms in the past, and I get it rightly so, is that there's no core campaign arc. There's no like, we are runners who are trying to steal data from the corporations, or we are insurgents who are always fighting the man, or we are explorers who are trying to do science. You're any of those things and all those things. So one of the additions to the Recontact version of the books, this latest form, is what we call campaign arcs. Went through and picked 12 sort of what we thought of as quintessential like stories that could be told in the Blue Planet setting, and did a sort of structural layout of those with introductions, kind of core PC types, NPC options, plot hooks, and then kind of aimed those at each of these different story types, ranging from things I've already mentioned, like being insurgents or being soldiers, to things like being investigators or being scientists in a classic like science horror story.
Yeah.
There's even one riff on sort of the Captain Nemo Jules Verne story. There's a couple of sort of day in the life kind of arcs. And then each of the major factions kinds of gets its spotlight as well. So if someone is a little bit intimidated or a little uncertain where to start, they can just grab one of those and use it as written. They can take a couple of them and kind of chop them up and mix them into the salad that they want, or they can use them as inspiration to kind of create their own. But there's a lot of guidance provided in terms of sort of digesting the setting and putting it into a form that can be quickly brought to the table.
That sounds like a great addition. Like you say, the game has been out for over 20 years, so there's been so much play testing, if we call it that, because it's an out game, that there's so much you can have learned. What are the other kind of big things that have been added in or edited, taken away in Recontact?
Well, one of the things I'm most excited about, because when I started doing games, black and white art was state of the art, and I was just excited to be able to take all the imagery that's been floating around in my head for the last 25 years and actually put it in full color on the page. So not only do we have gobs of great, really beautiful full color art that evokes the setting, we also have a whole bunch of extremely detailed cartography for the planet and many of the settlements, done by an actual cartographer who has not only a professional map maker, but has done cartography for the industry for lots of different projects. But that's one of the things I'm most excited about. In terms of other content, we have gone through, and 25 years is a long time. Smartphones are a huge technology that we kind of missed when we were sort of trying to project into the future. We had all the same features, but they were all individual devices and kind of Star Trek style. and so it was very clear that we needed to go back through and do a revamp of technology in the light of kind of how things look now. So not only did we do that, editing out and editing up a lot of things, but we've added a lot of things that have sort of become not just sort of science fantasy now, but things that are if not actually on the horizon, at least much more plausible options. So there's been some tech editing. There are a few new character options. One of the things that we made sure to include, because everyone loves role-playing games that have non-human species options, right?
Sure.
So with the heavy lean on genetic engineering in Blue Planet, we had variety of species that you could play. We added a few more of those that I think are pretty cool and add some texture to the setting and certainly provide some player options. The mechanics themselves, that's probably, in terms of effort and page count, probably the biggest single change in the book content. Those were completely rewritten, and like I said, the genetics from the second edition are there. These are much more streamlined, much more compact, and give a lot more agency to the players, both in terms of their creativity and how they want to run the game. I will say though that 700,000 words and all, it was, no word went untouched. Like the whole books were edited, so we were looking to make sure we were being as inclusive as we could. We were looking to make sure that we were taking into account sort of modern perspectives on all kinds of social and political phenomenon, just so that the setting in the new books would read modern and would read inclusive, and would be sensitive to a lot of the things that we weren't really paying attention to in the industry back in the 80s, right? And so I'm glad we had the opportunity to do that work as well.
Yeah, I mean, one theme that was prevalent 25 years ago and today is that big theme of kind of environmentalism and things like that. So I'm assuming that's still a really big theme within the book. That hasn't changed at all.
It is, yeah. In fact, I kind of leaned into it harder, if anything. I mean, 25 years ago, it was a long time. I was just out of grad school. I had studied ecology. I was teaching science, and I still had the kind of bright-eyed idealism that we were going to do better, and that all we needed to do was give it a little bit more time and a little bit more awareness. But as I think anybody that's paying attention will have to admit, we're not. And I know that role-playing games are a silly thing, and that they're not much of a platform. But since I was already there, and it's where my passion is, I wanted to make sure it remained at least a small voice advocating for better stewardship of the planet, and so leaned into that even more heavily. I realized that for some people that has been a turnoff, and we've had that criticism in the past. But I feel like you've got to say what you believe in, and even in a small space like a role-playing game, it's important to stand up for those things.
I definitely agree, and I think you're absolutely right that, I mean, I think stories can change people's hearts and minds or make people aware of things, and role-playing games is a different method of storytelling, in the same way that film or other forms of media can be. I think role-playing games are like that, and it can be even more personal because it's one that you create around the table with your friends. So yeah, I think it definitely does what you're trying to do there.
100% agree.
So, I mean, talking about the games, we've got all these big changes and things coming in. One thing we haven't really talked about is the creatures in the planet, and that's obviously a huge part of exploration and the world. Do you have any kind of creatures or beings in this world that you'd like to shout out?
Well, that's one of my favorite parts of the game. Given my history as a biologist and a biology teacher, a marine scientist, It was a big focus of the first edition, creating all these different organisms and trying to do so in a way that gave them a biological veracity, a hard science fiction edge, and thinking about how they would have evolved under the circumstances that are present in the planet and the way the backstory is laid out. Probably the thing that I was most excited about in the new edition regarding the creatures is that part of the Kickstarter was a stretch goal of allowing us to illustrate each of the ones that appear in our kind of in-universe wildlife guide. And it was awesome that we were able to use the same artist to do that. So there's a kind of coherency through the whole thing as an in-world document, so that individually, I think they are all awesome. The image that you've got up on the screen now, the one I shared specifically because I just love that. Two things about this image. I love that the creature design itself. I think they did a fantastic job with it, but I just also love the scale, that it's this enormous creature that speaks to sort of the alienness of the Poseidon planet ecosystem, and I think it does a good job of exemplifying that.
Fantastic. Well, that's great to see, and I'm really excited to see all the illustrations, because the artwork that I've seen has been gorgeous. It looks like a beautiful book. So, I mean, congratulations on it being complete. It must be so nice to have them in the warehouse and having that final stretch of the project being made. So yeah, congratulations on it being out there.
I can't express, like, the stages of fatigue have been pretty pronounced, and the point now where I just want to see it get into somebody's hand who backed it now, and then finally I can take a breath. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, if you are not a Kickstarter backer of Blue Planet and you are interested, as we mentioned, you can go to DriveThruRPG to pick up a PDF in a few months once the fulfillment's been done, or if you go to gallantnightgames.com, they'll have information about getting physical copies of the game there as well. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us about Blue Planet. It's been so great hearing about the game and hearing about you and you know, your relationship with games. Before you go, I would do have a final question, and that's if you have any recommendations for any other tabletop RPGs.
I do, and I always make the same one. It's hands down my favorite role-playing game. It's called Eclipse Phase. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It is, I joke, in fact, I've had some conversations with the designers, and I've told them that it's what I would like Blue Planet to be when it grew up, right? Okay. I think they did an awesome job creating a very unique, extremely compelling, a very sexy science fiction setting. And as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, not only do I love science fiction, but horror as well. And the combination of the two is kind of a perfect blend, the way they've done it. And so if you're not familiar with Eclipse Phase or never had a chance to play, highly recommend seeking it out and making some time on your table for it. It's really great.
Great. Thank you so much. That's a great recommendation. Thank you again for coming on, and thank you to everyone who has watched and listened. That's all for this week, but we will be back next week with more sci-fi tabletop RPGs for you. Thanks very much, and goodbye.